And with us today is David Hincapie from the Small Business Administration, the Washington Metropolitan area. And we're going to let David go through a lot of information that he has on the latest and greatest on PPE loan forgiveness. What we'd like to do is, if you can see the chat function, if you're on a computer, there's a chat button at the bottom, or a little cloud at the bottom. We'd first ask you, if you have questions as we go through, please place your questions in the chat, and we will get to everything we can before the end of the before the end of the webinar. So with that, I want to turn it over to David.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. All right, let's get right into it. So I'm going to go over a quick review of the PPP loan forgiveness provisions that came out on the addition to the interim final rule that was published in the Federal Register on June 1st. There have been other things added to that are not directly related to loan forgiveness, and I'll go over that a little bit. And then we'll just move right into any questions you might have, because I find that that's more illuminating for people instead of me just giving a lecture on this. So, as you know, there was the legislation that was recently signed, that was the PPP Flexibility Act, and it changed some of the rules regarding PPP loan forgiveness. Lots of business owners wanted the loan forgiveness threshold to go down from 75% so that they could use a greater amount for non-payroll costs. There were several reasons for this. Part of it was they couldn't get people back to be employed. So they got the money for 2.5 months of payroll as per the formula. And then they found they can't get everybody back. So there was no way for them to do 75%. Now, in the interim final rule, it did say your loan forgiveness amount will not be reduced if you do certain things like make a written job offer to the person to come back to work, to get back on the payroll, because having the original number of employees was one of the conditions for forgiveness. So that was not a problem, but still people said, look, we need, even regardless of that, we still need more money really for operating costs and expenses than we do for payroll. So it was reduced. It was reduced to 60%. Now the forgiveness threshold, one of the conditions is 60% of the PPP money must be used for payroll and payroll costs, and 40% can be used for non-payroll costs. All right, so that's the first important change. The next change was that the covered period extended to 24 weeks instead of being just 8 weeks, because for some reason people thought they might have trouble using up the money within an 8-week period. They needed more time, so they gave people 24 weeks. The other major change, well, those are really the two big changes to that, right? So now you can use use it during the 24 weeks. You now have 60% available, or 40% available, up to 40% available for non-payroll and payroll costs. Now, the interim final rule, and this is something I'm going to send to Jane. If you already haven't downloaded it, there's a couple of websites where you can stay up to date on this, and this is why I don't have slides, because for about a month, there was new stuff coming out every week, and now it's coming out maybe every 2 weeks. But I don't want people to get hung up on what they see on slides and download them and then stop looking at the websites. You go to sba.gov/PPP, and then that's where all the PPP stuff is. There's a table of contents. Look at the contents, look at the headings, and you'll see the information that you want to get to. Loan forgiveness, as well as the rules, and that's under forms and guidance. Guidance is where you will find the interim final rules, all of them. Okay. So that's what's happening there. I want to go over a couple of things, the loan forgiveness process. So the most important thing to remember about the loan forgiveness process is that the loan forgiveness decision is going to be made by the lender, right? You're not going to send something in to the SBA directly. You're going to send something in, the application for forgiveness, to your lender. Your lender is going to review it, and using the guidelines they get from us from the final rules, they're going to make the loan forgiveness decision. Now, this is not a one-time thing. This is really more a collaborative thing where you're going to call them up and go, what do you need from us so that we can get the full forgiveness? And they're going to tell you what documents to send them. And then they will send it to us. And then we're going to look it over rather quickly. And we're going to do the forgiveness. And then that means we're going to pay them. And then it's all done. And you're all ready to go. So that's the most important thing to remember there. Now, there's a Q&A on the final rule that you want to read, because the Q&A is really where you get most of the information to understand how the rules are supposed to work, just like we're going to do here in a moment. There's questions regarding caps on the amount of loan forgiveness available for owner employees and self-employed individuals, their own payroll compensation. This was an important one because there are a lot of small business owners that it's a single member LLC, or maybe it's sole proprietor doing business as, and that has caused a lot of consternation with them because you don't have payroll, so they don't really know how this works for them. So that question we'll get into it right there. There's another one that's very important regarding the reductions to loan forgiveness amount if you fail to meet the conditions for loan forgiveness. So let me go over those again. There's, broadly speaking, 4 conditions for loan forgiveness. First one, you meet that threshold of the percentage of the loan that you use for payroll and payroll costs. It's now 60% instead of 75%. Second condition, you keep people employed. So originally it was you got to keep people employed for 8 weeks during the covered period, or if you're 8 weeks, if you got it before the end of the original covered period, which was June 30th, 8 weeks from when you got the loan, right? 56 days. Third, you pay people the same amount of money you were paying them before. Whatever their hourly wage was, an average number of hours, that's what you pay them. Whatever their annual salary was, that's what you pay them, with a $100,000 a year cap. And then the other one is you keep the same number of employees, right? So whatever employees you had from the reference period, which is the reference period is a period in which you say, this is what our payroll was, this is the number of employees we have. That reference period goes from January 1st of this year until February 30th, I believe, or February 28th of this year. Or you could use a 6-month period from 2019. You could use that as a reference period. And you have your choice of reference period, whatever is in your best interest, whatever benefits you the most, because some people had their payroll change between this time last year and earlier this year. And it was unrelated to the pandemic, right? It's just somebody quit or you fired someone in January or February. So you choose your reference period. Okay, so if you fail to meet these conditions, then there will be a reduction in how much of it is forgiven, and then it just becomes a loan. So this is discussed here in this Q&A that's in there. It's worth you reading. I don't want to bore you by just reading it, right? So we'll send it to you and you can read it. There's a definition in this as well of what does a full-time equivalent employee mean? There's your definition. People have been asking us questions before this came out. We gave them our best guess and understanding, and it turns out it's pretty predictable. It was what was in here. So it's all in here if you have questions about what is a full-time equivalent employee. The other one, this is an important one for some people with lots of employees. If a borrower restores reductions made to employee salaries and wages or full-time equivalent employees by not later than June 30th, can the borrower avoid a reduction in his loan forgiveness amount? So remember, there were those 4 conditions. This refers to the condition of keeping the same number of employees and keeping the pay levels the same. But if you restore the number of employees and restore the pay levels back to the reference period before June 30th, can you avoid a reduction in the loan forgiveness amount? And you will all be happy to hear, in a way that is unusual in a lot of government regulations, you get a very unequivocal answer. Yes, full stop. You can avoid a reduction in the loan forgiveness amount. Can I avoid the reduction? Yes, full stop. And then there's a couple of paragraphs explaining to you exactly how you can avoid a reduction in the amount that is forgiven, and so that it doesn't turn into a loan. Okay. There are some changes for seasonal employees. They're covered in there as well. I recommend you go, you read them. If you have questions, you get in touch with me directly. Jane will give everybody my email and my phone number. Call me, email me. I don't care. That's what I'm here for. Don't feel like you're interrupting my work. This is the work. You guys are the work. Okay, so now, SBA loan review procedures and related borrower and lender responsibilities. This one is another interim final rule addition that talks about what your responsibilities are regarding documentation and how you're going to prove that you've done what you're supposed to do so you can get the forgiveness. You should read it. I'm not going to bore you to death by reading this here. It's not gripping prose. So this is on you. You got to read it. Loan increases. Some of you may have wanted to do loan increases. There's a section here that talks about loan increases. It mostly applies to loan increases for seasonal employers who did a loan amount calculation with past information from the final rules, and then stuff changed, and now they clarify things for seasonal employers, and so you can request loan increases. Okay. That's an overview of the final rules. I want to get into the Q&A because that's really where we're going to get anything useful here going. So have at it.
Okay, well, the first is a comment, and I'm going to give everybody, I'm going to put in before we close, I'll put in David's email and his phone number. But the first comment was, you mentioned that the SBA's review of the bank's approval is very quick. This person saw in the guidance that the SBA has 60 days to complete the review and the bank has 30 days to forward to the SBA, and then the SBA has 60 days. So it could be more like a 90 days. So what is the expectation for somebody being notified that, yeah, this is what's forgiven?
So our best guess working within the SBA and the way we see things happening is, for the small ones, so you probably know that, after everybody got really upset, justifiably so, when these massive companies got these loans, and then the SBA changed the rules and said, okay, we're going to review every loan above 2 million. Everything under 2 million, we're not going to review it to see if they really needed the loan, because that was one of the certifications that the borrowers had to make is, current economic conditions make this loan necessary to support the operations or the existence or the solvency or something like that of the business. Of course, all these big companies, they saw that and they just ignored it. And then they got called out and then they got embarrassed and some of them gave the money back. But they're only going to review that certification. Do you really need it? Or did you really need it for loans above 2 million? So the ones underneath, under that are not. Now, they're going to try to not have that massive backlog because there's 4.5 million loans, right? So yes, they gave themselves all this time to do these reviews because there's so many loans. But in practice, we expect that it's going to be much faster than that because the small loans, what's there to review? You're going to send in a 940 or a 941. We're going to look at your payroll and okay, done, loan amount, check. All right, there, goes back to them. We expect that it's probably going to be a 2-week process, unless there is some giant problem, which right now we don't anticipate. Now that we've been through the process we've been through this work of how to process so many loan applications, that massive number in such a short amount of time, they've refined the speed at which they're doing things. And so now, for example, people applying for a PPP right now are getting it much faster than what's happening early on. So yeah, it could be a 90-day process. We don't expect it's going to be a 90-day process.
Okay, thank you. The next question, what about FTE calculations when there are very variable employees? Could be a few hours a week for special projects. In other words, it sounds like how do you do calculations when there's several part-time employees who are just doing project work?
If by variable, they mean 1 week it could be 3 hours, the next week it could be 25. That's a huge variance. There's going to have to be an average, and that's not satisfactory. That's not the best way. I mean, because the average of 3 and 25 is this number in the middle that has almost no meaning in the reality of the business. But that's what we're stuck with.
Okay.
right? It's in the regulations. That's what we're stuck with. I mean, we can't change it.
Okay.
Or I can't, unless they change
Okay.
it.
And yes, this session is being recorded, and everybody who registered will get a link to the recording. Julie's taking care of that now. Do the same employees need to be employed by June 30th for the forgiveness? If we had people voluntarily leave, do we need to backfill those positions?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. See, this is why, because there's so many new things that I forget to mention. One of the important ones. Voluntary resignations or voluntary reductions in hours do not affect the loan forgiveness, and it's discussed in this rule, right? But as always, you have to document it. Have them give you a written request of the voluntary reduction in hours or just their resignation so that it doesn't affect your loan forgiveness.
Okay.
And if you do want to restore, it's a head count. It's really a head count. It doesn't have to be the exact same person.
Okay, that answers the first question. Do the same employees need to be employed by June 30th for forgiveness? And it's just the head count, right?
It's the head count.
Okay. Let's see. Does the 40% still cover only rent, utilities, transportation, phone, and mortgage interests? What does transportation include?
It doesn't define it explicitly, but let me go back to something I was telling people before when it was a 75-25. My way of saying this is, don't be cute, don't be clever, don't try to be cheeky about this. You want forgiveness. Don't get cute. My colleague, Rod Johnson, the lender relations specialist, says, don't color outside the lines. If you are trying to stuff some other expense into the definition of expense so you can use the PPP to cover it, don't get cute, don't get clever. What would you normally call a transportation expense if this weren't a potentially forgivable loan? Let's imagine you have a loan that's not going to get forgiven. And in any commercial loan, there's going to be use of proceeds stipulations in the loan. And they're going to say, you can use it for this and for this and for this. If you use it for something else, you violated the terms of the loan, and there could be penalties. So in this one, there's no specific listing of what are transportation costs, but be reasonable. What would you normally call a transportation cost? Stick to that. Don't risk not getting forgiveness because you want to get cute and clever.
Okay. And if the forgiveness portion of expenses are not forgiven until 2021, how does that affect our 2020 tax returns? Oh,
so any forgiven amount does not get count towards your taxable income. If I think that's what they're asking. Does the forgiven amount, does the forgiven amount count as income? No, it's a loan. It's merely a loan that was forgiven.
Okay. When should you apply for forgiveness? At the end of your 56-day period or at the 24 weeks?
That is a little bit unclear. We've been trying to find it, and it's because they haven't yet told us internally what the exact process is going to be so that when we can advise people about it, right? But find out from your bank what they want to do. Find out from your lender what they want to do. They may come back and say, you know what, we're waiting for guidance from the SBA from this. But find out from them because it's going to go through them.
Okay. If you have expenses beyond the amount of the loan that meet the definition, should you include all of those expenses? For example, if you have a $100,000 loan, should you itemize the $300,000 of expenses you had that meet the definition, or keep it simple and provide only those that are up to the amount needed to cover.
300,000 in expense. Wait, you have 100.
Okay, in other words, if your loan was for 100,000, there's no way it'll cover all the expenses you had. You really had $300,000 worth of expenses. Should you document the 300,000 or just the 100,000?
Well, so you'll have 40,000 available for the expenses, and you're going to use it for those expenses. So keep the receipts, as it were. I mean, as a business, you're probably documenting those other expenses anyways. So all you need is the documents for the 40,000 that you're going to use for the forgivable portion of the loan, right? Just document that. What did you use it for? What did you use the other? See, we're going to know what the 60,000 you used was for, because it's going to be in the documents you submit to us. Well, here, the payroll documents, the 940s and 41s, et cetera. Okay, we're going to know. All right, what did you use the other 40,000 for? Well, we used it for this. Here are the documents. There, done. I presume you were documenting all the other expenses you have.
Makes sense. I'm going to go back through the questions. That's the last one that I've seen here, but let me go back and see whether I missed anyone. If you have more questions, please put them into the chat and we'll be happy to get them answered. As we said, yes, it's recording. I'm sorry that the video is breaking up for some folks. Hopefully it'll be okay when the recording. Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Okay, how about forgiveness for the self-employed?
That's very broad. What specifically are you asking?
Okay, let me do this. I'm going to unmute. That's where's Linda?
Yeah.
I don't know which number you are, Linda. There you are. I'm going to unmute you, Linda, and let you ask the question, be more specific.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. So we have several clients who are sole proprietors as well as single member LLCs, and they have received PPP funds. The big question becomes, how can they be guaranteed forgiveness? Because of course they don't have payroll. Their PPP funds were calculated based on 2.5 times their net profit from 2019. So, and a lot of them don't have rent. They have a cell phone and whatever. So we're very unclear about that.
So what we've been telling people is, because we had to invent a definition of payroll for self-employed people for this new and unusual program, the best way to show how you've been using the money is the money comes to your business account. Transfer money, pay yourself a check, whatever, to your personal savings account or checking account, whatever. And then we say, okay, that's what we used as payroll. And then whatever balance of the loan that you use, of the money that you use for expenses, itemize those and you have them covered so that they know that this is the stuff, the expenses that were allowed. Right? That's the best way to document what went to payroll, the stuff you transfer from a business account to your personal account, and then what went to expenses.
So technically then a self-employed person could take whatever, so let's say they got $9,000. They could take that $9,000 and just take that as their payroll.
Yeah, that's right. They don't have.
So they don't have rent or anything else. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. If they don't have any other expenses, but of course on their taxes, they usually itemize some kind of deduction, some expenses on their Schedule C. There's going to be something. So use that. Use the 40% if you wish for that. And remember that 40% is a maximum. They don't have to use it all for that. Right? They could do a greater amount for what we're calling payroll for these self-employed persons.
Got it. So can I circle back to the question that I had about the forgiveness? We know that the forgiveness, the expenses that are forgiven in 2020 are not deductible expenses. But if the period ends on 12/31/2020, we're not going to, our clients are not going to get the forgiveness, is not going to be taken until the year 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about this cross-year situation. You know, if it was just the 8 weeks, we all got our money in April, boom, at the end of June, July, we were getting our forgiveness, it was a moot point. But now we're not going to get forgiveness till a following year.
Yeah. So this was brought up in 2 articles, actually, and we don't have an answer yet. Let's stay in touch so that as soon as we find, because as soon as this came out, we noticed it and we thought, oh God, they didn't answer this question. They didn't anticipate this question. So we have sent the question up through the channels. Please give us a clarification on this. We hope we're going to get a clarification sometime in the next 2 weeks on this, because that's about how it's been happening, like once a week or once every 2 weeks. We get another addition to the final rule clarifying something that comes up as a question from the field. There's no answer yet. It is a very good question, and we asked it immediately, but we haven't had an answer yet.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, I have a couple more questions now. Let me go back up. I'm not sure I understand this one, so I may have to unmute the person. Are the limits per person still $15,385?
Yeah, so here is the caps on the amount of loan forgiveness available for, if this is for owner employees and self-employed individuals, it says that it can be no more than the lesser of 8/52, so 4/26, or 2/13. So 2/13 of 2019 compensation, approximately 15.38% of 2019 compensation, or 15,385 per individual in total across all businesses. So that's the limit that's there. Now, there's a longer explanation in this question here that goes on for a couple of other paragraphs. Read through that. If you have any questions, get in touch with me directly.
Okay. When do we need to have the head count back to the look back period? I've seen June 30th, December 31st, and the end of the 56-day period. What is the date the head count snapshot needs to be taken? Did I freeze or did David freeze?
Looks like David froze.
I think David froze. Let's see if we can get David back. Hang on, I'm texting. Okay, hopefully we'll get him back. Looks like he left. Let's see if he's coming back in. There he is. I thought.
Hey, I don't know what happened. It just disappeared.
We lost you for a moment.
Yeah, it just went dark. I don't know what happened. All right. So yeah, we were talking about this. Yeah, so read through that. If you have any questions, just get in touch with. Just give me a call directly, and we'll talk about it.
So that this was the look back period, right?
Oh no, this was about the loan for owner employees, the loan forgiveness amount.
Okay. This one is, when do we need to have the head count back to the look back period? I've seen June 30th, December 31st, and the end of the fixed 56-day period. What day is the head count snapshot taken?
Oh, so you start with your reference period and say that's the point that we want to get back to, and it's supposed to be before June 30th. right? So if there's people to hire back, send out those letters. And by the way, if you had a PPP, what were you waiting for? Right? Like, why weren't you trying to hire them back already? Right? But right now, okay, it's the 15th today. Send those letters out. Try to get them back. All right. So you're going to run into this problem probably. Some of them won't want to come back because there's until the end of July, I believe, there's the extra $600 a month from the federal government for your unemployment benefit. So they don't want to come back. Does that reduce your loan forgiveness amount? No, that is in an earlier set of instructions that said, make a written offer of employment. You want to remind them that if you make a written offer of employment while they're receiving unemployment benefits, they could lose their unemployment benefits if they turn down the job. I mean, it's a good faith, reasonable offer. It's your old job back at the same pay. So why would you not take it? Well, they may not want to because they want the extra $600 a month, but that's almost out. That's going to end in July, if I remember correctly. So that's a reminder to them that in their state, it's likely that you might be obligated to notify whoever the state authorities that put out the unemployment benefits. Hey, we made a job offer to them. They rejected it, and they'll get cut off. So give them that reminder. And then that way you don't have to worry about it. And you're covered. Just record whatever their answer is. You know, if they email you, send a written letter. If they email you back and say, no, I don't want the job, and you know, I don't care if I lose my unemployment benefits, okay, fine, you're covered. You did what you're supposed to do. You tried to get them back, they didn't come back. If you want to hire someone to replace them, well, you could do that too, if there's anyone to hire.
Okay. Do employer-provided HSA contributions count toward payroll costs or only health insurance premiums?
Health insurance premiums. Wait, what's HSA? Oh, savings account.
Health savings account.
Health savings account. No, it only says health insurance premiums.
Okay. Okay. How can we apply for remote access expenses to work from home for all employees? Does that count toward this? There was a county program where there was a grant program from Montgomery County that had money available for work from home and for remote, like teleworking type expenses. Is that included in any expense for the PPP forgiveness? Would that be maybe the 40%?
Oh, that's a really good question. That was not anticipated in this. You know what? I'm not sure. I'll try to track down an answer for that one.
Okay.
And so get in touch with me directly. Like, send me an email with the specific question, but that's a good one. I had no idea about this grant program, so it clearly was not anticipated.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to unmute the person who asked it and see whether there's any more clarification that she can give us.
Okay.
Hi, I just tried to unmute you. You want to ask your question? Ghanem? You have your hand up. Okay, well, ask something in the chat if you still want to, if you want to ask more detail about that question, and we're happy to get some answers. Does anyone else have any questions? I put David's email in this. We'll send his other contact information when we follow up with a link to the video.
Jane, send him my mobile number because we're all teleworking now. So
got it. Okay, we'll do. Okay, I can go ahead and put that in here right now then. I'll do it right now for everybody if you just give me a moment. Think of any other questions you might have.
And lastly, I just want to say to everyone, like, you know, relax. Everyone's really nervous about this. Like, how do I get, you know, and the newspaper, the one thing I don't like about the news coverage of this is, oh, it's terribly complicated. It's not that complicated. It really isn't. Like my colleague Rod and I say, it gets complicated if you're going to try and be color outside the line and get cute with this. Then it's going to get complicated. But just remember the intent of the program. stay color within the lines, stay in that, the whole thing will get forgiven and it'll be all right. Right. And any other questions you have, just give me a call.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions? Okay, as soon as this gets processed or whatever within Zoom, Julie will send out a link. We'll also include, David's going to give us links to the pages he was talking about. So we'll send those out. And you've also seen his mobile number and his email in the chat. I'll put those in the follow-up email as well. So with that, unless anyone has any more questions, thank you very much, David, for joining us today. You always have a lot of answers to questions that everybody has, and we appreciate you being with us and taking the time. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.